The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Siege, we've passed another weekend in the NHL schedule. A lot more teams are getting their seasons going. It's really early, but there's a few things I've noticed, and I'd like to get your thoughts on those things I've noticed. It's a few starts that I feel a little concerned over, and I'm wondering if it's a little too soon to judge. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, let's do it.
We should start in Edmonton. The Edmonton Oilers, 0-3 to start off their season. We've seen this movie before last year, and we know how it ended for them. But at least in my head, just seeing them down 0-3, while I did expect there would be some kind of lull, definitely some Oilers fans panicking a little bit. How do you read that situation about what's going on in Edmonton 3 games in?
Yeah, I think of all the teams in the league, they've earned some benefit of the doubt, because last year, it was 2-9-1 into November to start the year for them. They ripped off a 17 or 18 game win streak, and a few others that were 8 or 10 games. They, finished very comfortably in the playoff spot. We know what they did in the spring. And so, while it's hard to pick any positives out of their start, I mean, getting outscored 15-3 on home ice over 3 games is kind of tells you everything you need to know. Defensively, they're not clicking. Obviously, they haven't got their own power play going. They haven't got their top stars doing what they do yet. I just think it's a little too soon to be smashing any panic buttons because, I don't see any reason compelling anyway at this point to think they're not going to get it together. But it's still an alarming start. I mean, you get 3 home games to start the year. It's actually 4 because they play another one before going out on the road. You're playing teams that didn't make the playoffs last year, specifically in Chicago and Calgary. There's some opportunity there, I think, to get your mojo going, to get everyone engaged, and it's gone the other way for them, pretty quickly. So, I'm personally not going to freak out about that one too much yet, but I did watch some of the Sunday night game against the Flames, and they just look like they're not connecting to me. I mean, they're not completing passes, not nearly as dangerous as you'd expect them to be, and the puck's going in a lot at the other end of the ice. So, I'd say stay tuned in Edmonton. I'm a little bit more open if we're going to go to other places where I think there could be greater concern growing, even though it's not even yet a full week into the season. But we have seen this show before, as you mentioned. I'm not going to sit here and start pounding the button a week after we recorded an episode where I said I think they're going to go ham on the league. I still feel pretty good about where the Oilers are at for this season, big picture speaking.
So if you're Connor McDavid in that Oilers locker room, it's too early to do the dig in right now speech?
Definitely too early for that. I mean, I think that they can lean on what they went through last year, right? I mean, the bones of this team, obviously they've lost some sort of role players, guys like Fogle and, players that were maybe part of their penalty kill. Like there's probably some reasons we can point to things not going well with getting used to some personnel change. But I mean, the guts of the team remain the same. And I think they can point to look, when we've been pushed into a corner before, we've always responded. I think, there'll be a little more urgency in the way they're practicing and the way their meetings are being conducted until they get winning. Because, it does, I'm sure it weighs a little on their shoulders, weighs a little bit over their head. Having the big O in the win column to this point. But yeah, there's no reason for, banging anything, breaking anything. I mean, it's a little different. If you're a team like the Buffalo Sabres and we obviously saw Rasmus Dahlin and Peyton Krebs get into a fight at practice on Monday, for them, they haven't really done it, right? So I could see there being a bit more reason for speeches and a lot of noise behind the scenes, because they're trying to talk themselves into it. I think there can still be a steady calm to what Edmonton's doing. It's just they need to focus better. They need to execute better. I mean, it was pretty sloppy, the third period of that game against Calgary. I mean, they're just not completing passes. They're not entering the zone with any control. They're not getting set up down there. I mean, the things that, the hallmarks, I guess, of Edmonton Oilers hockey just were not to be found in that game. And, the problems are almost so deep, you can't hang it on one person. You can't be like, oh, the goaltending's been lousy, but that'll come around. I mean, it's it really feels like it's been a team effort in starting slowly and not being crisp. And so, I think that's probably the approach in Edmonton more than, maybe as I mentioned, some other places, it might be, really actually feeling the heat. I don't think they're truly feeling the heat, at least not yet.
We should get to Buffalo. There's another team I want to mention as well, but we should mention Buffalo. They did have that rough start to their season as part of the Global Series. They're 1-3 to start. You did mention the back and forth, the fight between Peyton Krebs and Rasmus Dahlin. Don't know if you saw Peyton Krebs after the fact on Instagram trying to smooth the waters over a little bit, calling Rasmus his best friend. But not the ideal start for a team that's trying to make the playoffs. They bring back Lindy Ruff as head coach. What do you make of that situation?
I bet Lindy Ruff loves seeing those guys get at it in practice. I mean, I think he loves seeing that kind of spirit within the team. I mean, kind of an unusual one. I mean, Rasmus Dahlin clearly hits Krebs low. Usually when you see a fight in practice between teammates, usually it's a battle drill, and obviously there's frustration in the team, that the emotions get high, some pushing and shoving, and then maybe a fight, right? I mean, it's not usually because somebody low bridges a teammate in a drill, which is what Dahlin did. I mean, to be fair, he did own up to it and said it was a bad hit. He put his hand up afterwards and said that was just stupid. But I think in general, you don't mind seeing the players show some amount of care, some amount of passion, some energy. I know it sounds ridiculous and old school, and obviously in all of our jobs, we don't settle. We don't deal with frustration this way. It's not an acceptable form of how you deal with people. But in a sport like hockey, I mean, it happens. I've been around teams that have, had some fights in practice. Man, I should have actually try to remember that. Phil Kessel got into one when he was a Leaf. I'm trying to remember who that was with. It was a long time ago, obviously. But I've certainly seen it over my years covering the league. And I do think it can be interpreted as a bit of a sign of life, and can be something, the way that Krebs is having fun with it on Instagram, for sure they're having fun with it in the dressing room, right? I mean, it's kind of becomes like an inside joke with your buddies, or something that can maybe ease some of the tensions. And so, it appears everyone came through it uninjured, which would be the only concern you'd have. Beyond that, it can be something for Buffalo to build on, but I get why the frustration is there. I mean, it might be the heaviest situation in the league. I mean, just how long they've gone without a playoff game. Yet another season where they're putting themselves behind the eight ball. Even when I'm talking about Edmonton, I'm sure as much as Oilers fans are frustrated, I think that they're all knowing, but in the back of our minds, we have no doubt that this group of players can go on a crazy run, and we expect them to do so. And in Buffalo, there's nothing but doubt. They have a lot of individually talented players, but they haven't done it as a team. They don't have the high end skill, right? They don't have a true first line. I think the Sabres, and that's not meant as a shot at Tage Thompson or something, but what the Sabres have is probably a second line as their first line, on a team that's going to win. And so, I think there is some doubt for whether they can piece it all together. And so let's see where they go from there. But I don't mind seeing a bit of, I know it sounds ridiculous, but boys will be boys. I think Lindy Ruff said the media, that it's kind of true. I mean, that it could be a bit of a rallying point, I guess is all I'm saying. It could be something that's like a pressure release valve. And, but if the losing keeps going there, I don't know what happens next. I mean, there's not an easy, you've already changed the coach, and obviously a lot of players have come and gone, and it's still only mid-October. What do you do to spark the system with that organization if they slide down the standings? I mean, they just can't afford to do it. They have to find a way, whether it's pretty or ugly or whatever, to string together some wins here. I'm
curious what the seat is like for Kevin Adams right now. If you were to measure to check the temperature, how hot is that seat for the general manager?
Well, it's hot because he's the one in charge of making decisions. He's been there for a few years. I've noticed. Indeed. Yeah, I've noticed some fans and media members are starting to look at him. I mean, this is what happens when things go wrong for a team. Inevitably, people start looking around for someone to blame. Often, just the nature of the sport is coaches take the blame, take the fall. That's not the situation here, right? Lindy Ruff's coached 4 games for the Sabres this season in his second stint there. Not to absolve him of any responsibility, but he's pretty new on the scene. And so I think it's only natural for people to make that link. But changing a GM even like right now, like what is that going to accomplish? I mean, maybe big picture, they may feel eventually they have to do that, but it doesn't feel like the move to spark them in season. So, I think collectively they have to find a way to start getting the job done a little better. And so little fire at practice, mark my words. I think that won't be the worst thing for them in the end, as kind of silly and as it is. And I really was surprised to see the hit Dahlin through. I mean, as I mentioned, usually it's a board battle game or drill that the coach does that leads to a fight. It's not usually headhunting or knee bridging that causes it in practice.
All right. What about the Colorado Avalanche? They're also off to an 0-3 start. That's not something I expected at all from a team that still very much has a cup window open.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's something we should have expected, not necessarily 0-3, but, they are down 3 of their top 6 forwards. Arturi Lehkonen still working his way back from injury. Obviously, Gabriel Landeskog is 2+ years in working his way back from his surgery. And you've also got Nichushkin still in stage 3 of the NHLPA player assistance program and for at least another month here. So, the fact that they're starting shorthanded, they've had to lean on some younger players. Callum Ritchie started the year with the team, a teenager, has great offensive skills. And I think a lot for that organization to be excited about. But in a world where all 3 of those other forwards were healthy and ready to go, I can't imagine he would be cracking the roster at this point in time. Unfortunately on Monday night, Devon Taves suffered an injury. So they might be down one of their top defensemen as well. They're not getting enough saves from Georgiev. We saw them make a waiver claim on Capo Kapanen from Winnipeg last week. And so they're really trying to piece it together right now to stay kind of above water until I think you get some of the players back into the lineup and you can become the version of what people expect you to be. And so this one to me is a little more cause for alarm than maybe even Edmonton, just because, there's some mitigating factors here and it's not like we expect those 3 forwards to play, on Tuesday or next Tuesday night. Like there's a window where they're going to have to play without these guys. And well, I think, obviously they still have the talent level with the high end talent like the Makars, the McKinnons, Rantanens to get their way through that. I mean, it's a pretty thin roster. I mean, they have cap challenges because of the guys they have injured, right? Nichushkin and Landeskog both eat up a lot of the available cap room. So it's not as though you could put those guys on LTIR and replace them with other players because you're going to have to take them off LTIR at some point where you need that cap space. So they're kind of in a difficult spot. And, I don't think they're going to go through a full losing season here, but it might be a tough year because of all these sort of, this is hockey people love to call adversity. This is real adversity, right? Like, I don't think this is manufactured. This might be a tough year for the Avs to get into the playoffs just because, they're not healthy. They don't have tons of available cap space to make moves. They're going to lean ever more so on their top players. But, if they're not getting enough saves at the other end from Georgiev, I mean, what do they do? I mean, I could see this being a slog of a year. The flip side of that is if they can get through it, if they get healthy, if they find their legs, I mean, they might be good enough to go on another long playoff run. But, I'm definitely a little bit more concerned about their situation than Edmonton's. They've been outscored 20-10 in these games. Similarly ugly. Edmonton's 15-3. It's not just like they're losing a bunch of 3-2 games on a bad bounce. They've really been getting outclassed so far in the season. And I just don't see a lot of hope on the horizon. Whereas I'm just betting you start getting some McDavid monster performances and Draisaitl and Hyman. I just think that the Oilers are going to eventually, have that click in. I don't know if it's coming for the Avalanche, and I really don't know what they can do to try to bring in help from outside. I mean, if it goes on another few weeks, there's probably no choice for Chris McFarland, their GM. But they're kind of in one right now, and I am not fully smashing that panic button, but man, my hands.
You're hovering over it right now.
Because
this is way more concern than I anticipated for the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, well, it's the guys out of the lineup. I mean, it's hard to ignore that those are key contributors and big contributors to the team, and they're still a ways off unless Landeskog puts on his Superman cape and shows up at practice and is ready to go. I mean, it doesn't appear that that's the case. I mean, I think that they're day by day with him, and he's still a ways off. And even when he comes back, I mean, we all hope the best for the guy, but it's a big maybe. It's a big what if for him in terms of what he's going to be able to bring to the table.
Still early, but just picturing in my head Colorado losing ground to teams like Dallas, Winnipeg in their division, and another team on my list, the Utah Hockey Club, 3-1 to start off the year. The first star, according to the NHL from this past week, Dylan Guenther, 5 goals in his first 4 games. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of UHC. What do you think?
Yeah, and if you're in the Utah Hockey Club front office, you're feeling really good about this start because, they made the decision over the summer to sign Guenther to, a long-term 8-year deal and got him a pretty good value. If this was the risk, if they didn't sign him now, because he still had another year on his entry-level deal, is if he has a monster season and maybe you're paying him more next summer. And so they made the calculated gamble that to pay him now. I think he had 79, 80 games on his NHL resume entering the season. And you see him score 5 goals in the opening 3 games. You're like, okay, we feel good that we paid that man his money because the price might already be up after 1 week of the season. And so, the vibes are pretty good around Utah. They're a team I do really believe will stay in the playoff race. I think they're going to make the playoffs. It's hard to measure just how much better I think that just the existing players will be in a better environment, a happier place to go to work. No uncertainty hanging over them, an ownership group that's giving them facilities and things behind the scenes that they weren't getting in the previous spot. Probably riding some enthusiasm from the excitement of being in a new city that's excited to have them. Plus the offseason moves the team made. I mean, to me, it all adds up to them having that kind of season, and they've taken care of business so far. I know they lost on Monday, but to win their home opener and then go to New York and take 2 out of 3 games in that region on the road, that's a strong start to the year. And that's what you're looking for. I mean, if you are a Buffalo, if you're a Utah, if you're an Ottawa, these teams that are trying to, climb up and get to a level they haven't before, I think that the strong start for those teams is especially critical. The teams that have been there and done that, Boston, for example, has had some ups and downs early in this season. Like I'm not that worried about a Boston, even if you haven't liked all their performances so far. And you might have some individual concerns with things going on. I just think a team like that is going to figure it out and has the veterans needed to be there when it matters. But, these other teams have to build some belief. And I think that's what Utah's done. I think Gunther's helped them do it. Barrett Hayton's had a nice start to the year. And this is what you hope a rebuild does, right? I mean, the Arizona Coyotes had to struggle through the tough years where, the last 3-4 seasons where they were starting to stockpile these draft picks and not really being overly competitive in that moment, but it was with this in mind. And now you've got a team with Josh Doan too. You've got a lot of these homegrown players that are helping drive things forward, in addition with the Kellers and the Krauses and those that have been there for a long time. And so, I like what I'm seeing out of Utah, and the vibes are pretty immaculate there for that, the NHL's newest city anyway, if not a new franchise.
One other team I want to mention, even if they've only played 2 games, the Vancouver Canucks, their first game against Calgary, they lose in overtime. They blew a lead. They've already started Kevin Lankinen to this point. A better outcome for him slightly versus what Artur Silov went through in that first game. But just curious from your vantage point about Vancouver's situation, obviously playing without Thatcher Demko.
Yeah, I think Lankinen was a smart signing for them. Remember he was signed in training camp. I know they had a long dance with him and his agent over the summer and figuring out what would make sense. But, Lankinen has played a lot of NHL games. He's always been in a sort of number 2 role in the NHL, but, gave Nashville a lot of good games last year as their number 2 behind UC Saros. And so I think that having a combination of Seelovs who had some playoff success and Lankinen can help weather the storm, basically Demko works his way back from this knee injury that's not one that hockey players have been known to deal with. There's not a clear timeline. There's not a, you do these 3 rehab exercises every day and we know in 3 weeks you're going to be strong enough to perform at your best. I mean, there's still some doubt about the Demko situation. After 2 games, it's just hard to draw too many conclusions. It's not like 3 I've learned everything for the other teams that I am starting to draw conclusions from. But I think Lankinen was a good addition and I do think Vancouver will be able to get through this period. It just, the question is when does Demko come back and how good is he? How much can he be relied upon? Does he become their number one? Can he handle that workload? I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about that, but at least having Lankin in there, I do think gives you a little bit of comfort if you're the Canucks, because, between him and Silovs, they should be able to at least give them, you're hoping for league average with those guys. I'm thinking just give yourself a fighting chance and hope the team is good enough to keep winning until you want the big guy back when the games matter most.
One more team on the list. They actually have a winning record as of now, but their power play is very concerning. That is the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of 4 teams to have a conversion rate of 0% on the power play. Quick trivia question. Can you guess who the other 3 teams are?
No. I cannot.
I appreciate the honesty.
I could start guessing teams, but they would be based on nothing because I haven't looked that stat up.
That's okay. Anaheim is 1, Carolina is 1, Buffalo is the other team. Toronto, obviously, the 4th team on that list. I have to admit, Marc Savard, having seen him more up close in Calgary last year, for those who are in the market who have heard me say it, I was more convinced that the personnel, for whatever reason, I thought that was the right thing for him. It's just maybe there would need to be changes with some of the players there. I remember at the beginning of last year, he said what he had on paper, it looked as if he was going to have a top 5 power play in the NHL. That did not work out. And now he's in Toronto, where the weapons available to him should put him in that category of top 5. He's been on a team that's had a top 5 power play before in the NHL, but through the first few games of the season, nothing seems to be working. What do you think of the Leafs power play to this point?
Well, I'd say it's their biggest issue through 3 games. They've played well. They've only allowed 4 goals against in the 3 games. They very easily could have won all 3. They have a 2-1 record. The game they lost was a 1-0 loss in Montreal with 48 shots on net. So, I mean, they were right there in that one. This is definitely a concerning trend. And, I look at it like there's a blessing and a curse to take over the Leafs power play. They've been 5 or 6 years. They've been a top 5 power play consistently every regular season with the same personnel. And it's the same personnel Savard started with this year. But the problem is in a lot of those seasons, including last year, late in the year, that the power play has seemed to go a bit stale. It's struggled, and it certainly has not delivered for them in the playoffs. In fact, I think if you want to draw any big conclusions about why the Leafs are who they are, I think if their power play had to perform better in the playoffs, we're talking about them winning more than one playoff series in the last 8 years. I mean, the margins have been that close. I mean, they're losing game 7s. Against Boston, they were 1 for 21 on the power play. I mean, if they score a couple more goals on the power play, perhaps, they go to round 2 last year. And so it's an important job running the team's power play, but it's also a bit of a touchy one. I mean, who are you taking off of power play 1 if you come in and you're Marc Savard, right? You've got John Tavares, you've got Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews, and you've had Morgan Rielly on the point with that power play. And again, they've performed over a large period of time among the best of their peers in the league, with some caveats that it goes stale. I think that this start gives, a little bit of creative license to change things up. We saw that actually in their most recent game on Saturday. John Tavares was out with an illness in that game, but they also moved Oliver Ekman-Larsson in on the point, replacing Rielly. Ekman-Larsson brings more of a point shot threat. So I think it might keep the teams defending them a little more honest, because he's a possibility for a one-timer, but obviously he's passing out to the wings where he's got Matthews on one side. He's got Nylander on the other, a lot of dangerous shooting weapons potentially in that look. And so, I don't know where this goes from here, but it definitely needs to change it up. And I'm of the belief it might benefit the players because they have played so much together. And while that can obviously work, when you start running out of ideas, or maybe when the momentum goes the wrong way, I mean, really now with the 5 players I mentioned earlier that started the year as the Leafs power play 1 again, I mean, they had a tough 12 or 15 games at the end of last season, the regular season. They had a tough 7-game series against Boston. Now it's another tough couple games. I mean, it's a long stretch of time where they've just not been in sync together, maybe become a little too predictable, settling for kind of perimeter play, trying to set up a perfect pass versus, maybe having someone like Ekman-Larsson who can just hammer a shot from the point and create a little chaos down by the net. And then you start to read and react off of what the defenders are doing at that point. And so I think Savard, we're not going to put him on the full hot seat here after 3 games either, because he just got hired in the offseason. But I mean, he's kind of, I mean, depends how you frame it. Could be a good thing for him that in a way it's going so badly that it's like, all right, I'm going to just redraw this up because I don't think those players can push back against that or I don't think you have to worry about hurt feelings in quite that way. And, overall, I think this has to be a strength of a team like the Leafs, the way it is for Edmonton. If you're going to be built top heavy on the forward group, I mean, that has to be an area I think where you're cashing in. In addition, Craig Berube, the head coach, is having this team play a little differently at 5-on-5. And I think, they again, don't want to draw too many, but they've scored 8 goals, I believe, 8 or 9 goals in their first 3 games. Like they aren't necessarily going to be as run and gun as they've been in the past, which I think is a positive at 5-on-5. But I think it makes it even more imperative that your top players then, if they're going to buy into that style at 5-on-5 or getting their points are still scoring on the power play. And so that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I guess there's always something to worry about or fret about if you're a Leafs fan or you're covering the team on a day-to-day basis. There really isn't many concerning signs from the start of their season other than that power play, because it's not just that they haven't scored 0 for 9 so far in their opportunities, that they really haven't looked good. They haven't generated enough in that area where you're like, okay, they've just got some bad luck here. I mean, I think that it requires a redraw, a back to the drawing board kind of situation. Maybe it's just a matter of balancing out the units. I know a lot of teams don't do that these days, but maybe you basically build 2 pretty strong units and you basically say the number 1 unit's whoever's scoring and just create an internal competition. It might be the way to go, because going with all the stars together has not produced the kind of magic you'd hope.
Any other team worth being concerned over, or any other concerning situation, quote unquote, you've seen around the league that maybe we need to calm down a little bit over?
Look at us coming right out of a holiday weekend here in Canada and just trying to tune up the negative, right? I mean, we're not.
That's
what
true.
about giving the Calgary Flames some flowers and saying, hey, 3-0 start? No one would have called that.
The Calgary Flames do deserve to be on this list. I think the fact that they've played really well the first 3 games of this season, they absolutely deserve to be on this list. I'm very impressed with what I've seen from this team. I think a lot of the fans out there are realizing that maybe that start might not last forever, but considering what the pain they expect to feel over the next little while, this is as good of a start as you can have, especially with one of those wins coming against the rival Edmonton Oilers. This is a great start for the Calgary Flames.
Sure. And you've got young players there, right? You got some enthusiasm. Like, it's fun. They're scoring a lot of goals. They put up
Jonathan Huberdeau had a 4-point night.
Right. So you start to imagine maybe it going better than most of the pundits, including me, would have had them for the season. So it can't all be doom and gloom here. I mean, there's been some nice stories around the league too. We did spotlight Utah on a positive standpoint.
Yeah, it wasn't all negative.
But you're like, is there anyone else you're worried about?
That's fair. I could have worded the question differently. It's like, hey, are other teams you're worried about, other teams you want to praise? I could have worded that differently. You're right.
Yeah. So I'm giving the Flames some love because they're full value right now. I mean, they had the big comeback win in Vancouver on opening night. They beat Philly on home ice and then go to Edmonton and win a game. So, good for them. And they're scoring a ton so far, which, isn't necessarily what I would have predicted. And I don't know if it can last. I don't know how sustainable this team will be. But, look, this is a year where Craig Conroy, the Flames GM, doesn't want to be in fire sale mode again, right? I mean, I think he's of the mind, last season was all about all the players he was trading out of town and those kind of things. Like, I think the veterans that are still there, the Colemans and the Kadris and Uyghurs, like he wants them to be part of the solution as the team transitions to younger players. And so, if they can create a winning environment and harness some of that, we won't be in a position where when I put out the trade board in November, there's like 6 Flames on it like there was last year. So, I think all those things are small wins because, it's a long road if you're trading away that other NHL level talent. And it's a really good sign to see Huberdeau producing, because let's face it, whether I put him on the trade board or not, they're not trading him. He's got a massive contract, a lot of years left, and he hasn't performed up to it during his first 2 seasons in Calgary. And he's trying to maybe scrap back here and show that he can still do it, because he's not really that old, still in his early 30s.
Just one thing on Huberdeau, just really funny to see, maybe funny for me, but we've seen him on so many different lines with so many different centers in his time in Calgary. Elias Lindholm, Michael Backlund has come up, Nazem Kadri. It's something that it seems like he's playing some of the best hockey he's played, at least to start this season, with Martin Pospisil. And I don't know how many people pegged him as a number one center on this team before the start of this season, but really interesting to see that it's working with him. And also Anthony Mantha, who they signed this offseason. I know they expected those two, Huberdeau and Mantha, to have some chemistry together. I'm very curious to know how many people predicted in that front office Huberdeau and Pospisil to work together. I would imagine it's a very small number of people in that front office. But yeah, it's really, I think it's cool to see that Huberdeau's playing well. I'll give him this. Over the last 2 years where it has not gone great for him in that market, I know every time at least we've asked for him in that media market, he's at least gone up and said, hey, I know I'm not playing well. I know I need to do things better. He tries to find a little bit of humor in some of the situations he's gone through. But yeah, I get it. A lot of people in that market have been frustrated with him. So I think to see him at least show off some of that offensive capability that made him successful in Florida, if he's able to keep that going, that could be a really positive story for him. So,
well,
yeah,
for sure. I mean, the guy's got to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I mean,
100%.
You sign that kind of contract, no matter where you sign it, no matter what circumstances you sign it under, you're going to be feeling pressure to perform and to keep, putting up the kind of points he had. He was coming off 110 point season or something.
Yeah.
And then, and he hasn't gotten back to close to those levels. And then on top of that, the team you left goes to 2 straight cup finals and wins the thing after you'd been there for many years. So, I mean, between seeing your old buddies thriving without you, it's like your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend thriving without you, and then you're not, living your best life in the current day. I mean, it's probably been a tough couple of years for Huberdeau, and so it'd be a great story to see him push back against that. And look, at his story isn't fully written. He's still got a lot of years left in the league, and he's got to get by some of that stuff. And he's off to a nice start towards doing that. I
like the fact that we ended this segment with a positive.
Yeah, I should mention as well, I don't know if you saw it, but on Saturday I did watch the Flames did a nice ceremony for Johnny Gaudreau prior to the game. Yes. was a nice tribute. And on Tuesday, both Johnny Gaudreau and Matty Gaudreau will be honored by the Blue Jackets before their home opener. The Jackets have had Guy Gaudreau, their dad, the dad of the two boys on the ice, both on Monday and Tuesday morning at the morning skate. And so it's nice to see, out of what's obviously tragic circumstances, the hockey world continue to try to wrap its arms around that family and support them, give them love, make them, give them something to focus on each day and keep moving forward. So, I want to hat tip the Flames for the tribute they had, and I'm sure they've got a special one in mind here in Columbus before Tuesday's home opener against Florida.
That's very well said, CJ. I want to move on to another topic here. Gary Bettman. He was in Montreal yesterday. It happened to be the first Monday Night Hockey for Amazon Prime. I want to focus on these comments that Gary said to the media contingent there. I thought they were very interesting with regards to the future of how the game could be broadcasted in Canada. One quote that Marc-Antoine Godin put up on Twitter, I'll read that. The world is moving away from cable TV. The cord-cutting, cord-nevers continues, and the reach of cable and satellite linear is not where it was. The world, putting us aside, is moving towards other forms of distribution, and we're very mindful of that. And keep in mind that Amazon Prime is distributed in Canada more broadly than anything else. When you hear that quote from NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, what starts percolating in your mind?
Well, I'll say it confirms what I've already thought. I was at the Amazon event in September in Toronto when they launched the Face Off docuseries, but also unveiled the play-by-play crews for the Monday Night Prime Hockey and the like. And what really struck me that day being there is I looked around the room and I'm like, there's Gary Bettman, there's Bill Daly, there's Steve Maher, there's a bunch of other senior NHL people. I mean, the league was there en masse, to the point that I said to one of them, like, wow, I didn't expect you guys to show out in such full force. And he's like, yeah, we are all in on this. We're all in on Amazon. And, that point in time is where it dawned on me, okay, this isn't just like one docuseries that, obviously we've talked a lot about that show, on the course of the last few months here, but, it's a sign that Amazon is a really, really important company for the NHL to be doing business with. And the fact that we're 2 years out now, a little less than 2 years from a new Canadian rights deal taking effect, right now Rogers and Sportsnet have had, they're in a 12-year agreement, $5.2 billion, where they had all the rights. Obviously, they're subleasing some of the rights now to Amazon for the Monday night games that have started on Prime. But, it only seems natural to think that Amazon will have a spot beside what I assume would still be, Rogers and Sportsnet, potentially Bell and TSN, where I work as well. So just to name my employers, but I don't have any inside knowledge other than it's clear that TSN is still very much in the business of hockey, and so I think the next model for the Canadian rights deal, could very likely include both those Canadian networks plus some streaming aspect, and so it only makes sense. I mean, this is the way I watch a lot of my TV now. I still do have cable. Just because I'm such a sports nut, and frankly, I still think it's the best place to get live sports. But the more it shifts away from that, the quicker I'll be cord cutting as well, because, really it's only the live sports aspect that keeps me, locked to traditional cable. So, I think Amazon is a huge partner for the league. I mean, the fact Gary Bettman is up in Montreal for that debut game of the Monday night Prime game, the Penguins and Habs that was played on, there, and he's doing media availability. He's on the broadcast. Jeff Molson, the Canadiens owner, is on the broadcast. So, I mean, I always believe it's not just what people tell you, it's what they show you, right? And what the NHL is showing us is that they are all in, as the words were relayed to me on Amazon. And so, I would think from Amazon's end, I mean, it's about what they see back now. I mean, they're getting information back. Are people reacting to this? Are they getting the kind of audiences they want? They're going to have a Monday night game every week nationally available in Canada. It's Lightning Leafs next Monday, this coming Monday. And, if they get the kind of reaction I think that they're expecting, I mean, they're going to be bidding for that next rights deal in some way, shape, or form.
So you're ready for a world where you're watching games on Sportsnet Plus. Is it Sportsnet now? What's the name of it? I don't know. What's the name of it? You don't have Sportsnet? Well, okay, that's fine. TSN Plus for sure. That's the name. Sportsnet and then Amazon. Those are the three different places you could be watching the NHL in Canada as early as potentially 2027, 2028. Are you ready for that? I just
yearn for a world where they were all in one place and you could just watch every game. I think
so many people would too.
I realize there's a lot that goes into that, and some of it's the way these rights were traditionally sold, and so we're still married to this old idea of regional games and national games. And I do understand why it's not as simple as just saying, hey, it's all here. But if you could just say, hey, it's all here, and choose between which broadcast. I mean, I know there's versions of that package, but it's never as perfect as it should be. Frankly, if you could offer me that for all of sports, I would pay a stupid amount of money for it, and I don't need any cable. I don't need anything else. I would love it if my NFL games, if my Blue Jays games, if all my NHL games were in one place. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. I feel like the States, we're starting to see a little bit more of that bundling. I wonder if Canada catches on. Someone just steps up and says, hey, we have rights to all of these things. I don't know how that would work. I'm not an expert on that. I'm very interested in the media side of things, but I don't know exactly how that would work, but I'm very intrigued about Amazon Prime and them getting into the game. I caught a little bit of the Penguins Canadiens broadcast. I saw that Andy Petrillo had an interview with Cole Caulfield as part of that as well. It seems like they went off to a good start. I still think John Forslund as their play-by-play guy is a brilliant decision. I think for people who are not familiar with him, you have a very exciting voice. I think one of the best voices you can listen to in hockey. So I'd like to think that they're off to a good start. Obviously, Adnan Virk, part of the broadcast as well. I'm cool with considering Adnan Virk a friend of the show, by the way. I don't know how you feel about Adnan Virk. I love Adnan. So having him part of Amazon, good for him. But yeah, it seems like they were off to a good start yesterday.
Yeah, I watched most of the game. Very professional broadcast. I mean, the people they have working behind the scenes on that show have literally put on thousands of NHL games. They've worked for all the big networks. And so, if you didn't know any better, it was as good as what you'd expect from a national broadcast. It's just available in a new way. And I know they want to challenge maybe some of the norms, let's call it, some of the conventions of the industry as time goes along. But I mean, last night was their first ever broadcast I'll give them a few weeks here to warm up and find their footing and look for ways that they can maybe do some things differently than we've seen the cable networks tackle them. But they're off to a good start and should be a good game in week 2 with Tampa and Toronto.
Cool. Are you ready for some questions? It's Ask CJ time.
Bring the heat, brother.
Let's do it. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions on Discord and on Twitter. Here's one from Richard. Has CJ had the talk with Steve about the do's and don'ts for covering the Leafs as a credentialed correspondent? I guess in this case, Jesse would be the person you'd want to talk to. But Jesse seems like he knows what he's doing over there. I've seen the updates from reporter Jesse. He's good. Yeah,
if it was Steve, I might have had to have the talk. But the fact that it's Jesse that's using those credentials, I think he's smart, very smart guy. No, doesn't think he knows everything. Not that Steve does. I'm not trying to subtext Steve here a little bit, but I saw Jesse on Saturday morning at the morning skate before the Leafs Penguins game. He fit right in, as you would imagine. Very professional, and it's cool to see the SDPN get those creds and to know my buddies will be around a little bit more because we don't all see each other in person as much as you might think. It's pretty rare, but I'll be seeing Jesse a fair bit at the rink and. I think that's only going to benefit the coverage that you get on the STP.
Where does Jesse sit in the press row in Toronto?
I don't know because I wasn't at the game that night. So
okay.
I can't answer that, but I did see him at the skate and, everyone knows Jesse. The media world's pretty small. So he's not an unknown in the Toronto sports reporting community. And I'm sure he was welcomed with open arms there for game 1.
Shout out reporter Jesse. From Tyler, did CJ send his buddy Pierre LeBrun a get well soon card after the Cowboys lost by 40 points? We're getting a lot more Dallas Cowboys questions lately.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm also a Cowboys fan, so Pierre and I were mourning together. I can say the best thing about that game, and this was the Lions game on Sunday, is that I was in the middle of family Thanksgiving celebrations. I really didn't catch much of it. I saw the first 2 drives. Where the Cowboys had a field goal and the Lions got a touchdown. It was 7-3 when I kind of had to tune out and do turkey duty and get everything ready. And then by the time I saw the score again, they were well on the way to that blowout and I didn't watch any of the game. So that was good for my heart that I didn't have to endure that on, cause some days you almost like I'm excited. I have a clear Sunday afternoon. I'm at home. I can, pay close attention and really watch the game. And if I would have been terribly disappointed to watch that, but, Pierre was trying to find some positives in the group text because Darren Dreger was giving it to him in our TSN chat. And he's like, yeah, we got, X amount of guys injured and this and that. I knew it was going to be a hard season. So Pierre's funny nowadays. He used to take the losses hard. Now he's got kind of like the sage. He's always looking for the one bright spot or looking for a plausible explanation. So maybe Pierre should be sending me the get well soon card because I felt ill after seeing that scoreline.
Next one from David. Give me your turkey dinner starting lineup. I wonder how we would do that. I guess maybe mention 5 how about this? Mention 5 essential things you need at your Thanksgiving dinner.
Turkey, mashed potato, stuffing right off the bat. I don't know if gravy counts as one of the 5, but I want to have gravy on that turkey and mashed potatoes in particular. And then a vegetable. We had, what do we have? Brussels sprouts, I think.
Okay. You're just trying to remember what you had on your plate.
I obviously didn't prepare that part of the meal.
What did you prepare? Did you prepare anything?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do all the dishes. I'm moving the, well, it's a lot, man.
I meant food. I meant what did you make? Did you make anything?
I'm like the sous chef. You
didn't make anything. That's fine.
No, but I'm the sous chef. I went and got the turkey. I brought it there. Everyone plays a role. I'm moving. Okay. We had to move all these chairs and tables to one spot of my dad's house so everyone could fit because we can't get around one table.
You can't say you weren't a helping hand. I'll give you that.
And then I'll give you that. I literally did all the dishes, man. It was over an hour of dishes after, I don't know how many, 15 people there or whatever.
Did you wash or did you put them in the dishwasher?
Oh, I put what I could in the dishwasher, but there's a lot of pots and pans and things I had to hand wash. It was a thing. It was, trust me, I didn't sit on. The reason I didn't see the Cowboys game is because I was busy.
Okay. That was a necessary distraction for you.
let's face it, it's the passing of time. There's a lot of those years I went to those Thanksgivings or Christmases or whatever, where everyone's preparing food and I was just sitting on my butt doing nothing as a kid. So now I'm in the stage of life where I got to actually go buy the turkey and do things at an event like that. I'm happy to do it, of course.
I imagine that for sure. Definitely turkey's got to be there. I mean, we do things, I'm not necessarily that differently with my fam, but like we have to have that Caribbean flair. So we had some curry chicken this year. I'm trying to think what else we had. I'm literally looking at I don't know if it makes sense for me to just show it.
So you made fun of me and then you can't remember what you had.
Look at this. So this is actually a plate I had. So this is, for those who are not watching, see some macaroni pie there. There's some lamb. There's some rice and peas. Some roasted carrots are there. Some salad. I actually didn't have turkey on this plate here. But there's some ribs. We had some good ribs this year. This was an elite spread. We had an elite spread. There was definitely some stuff in there too. Oh man, we do things right. We do things right in my fam, particularly on my mom's side with the cook. My dad can cook too, but my mom and my auntie Karen, like they throw down. They threw down this year. I was very happy. My first time celebrating Thanksgiving with my parents in 2 years.
Nice.
Yes,
that's good.
I was very happy.
Small blessings having you back in the East.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think we had some pretty good turkey dinners. Let's see what else we have here in terms of questions. Corey Oliver, which type of weather conditions does Chris brag about the most when he goes for a run? Strong wind, rain, snow, ice, sketchy neighborhood, getting completely lost in unfamiliar surroundings, swamp-like humidity?
Oof. Well, the hardest for me is swamp-like humidity or just absolute extreme heat. Like it's the one thing my body does not take well to. Ironically, when you look outside and you see like a crazy amount of snow and it's cold, you might think like that must be the worst. I don't know if I'm weird. I kind of like that. I mean, you can dress for it for the most part. I got winter running shoes that are pretty grippy. So like, obviously you got to watch your strides that because you don't know if there's ice under that snow or whatever, but that's the part where you probably think I'm the most hardcore, where I'd actually argue it's not nearly as hard as for me, like a 30 Celsius, whatever, 100 degree Fahrenheit day. Like I find that very difficult. I just don't do well. So put it this way, the fall in the part of the world where I live, this is a great time to run because yes, some days are getting a little cool, but like, I just feel like my heart rate doesn't get up as high when I do the exercise. And, that's good. I'm actually doing a half marathon this weekend, Julian, in Toronto. So nice. I'm hoping for some cooler weather, even though actually it looks like it's supposed to get a little warmer on the forecast, but, keep it cool. I like that.
Well, dude, good luck for your half marathon. I know you're going to crush it.
We'll see. I mean, I'm okay, but I'm feeling a little slower these days. And, the one thing about running is you can notice the passing of time, put it that way. Like I can just tell it's not going to be as fast as I once was. And not because I didn't train well. I just think it's a product of getting a little older and slowing down a bit.
How many days is your streak at?
It's roughly 1,630, give or take. I only know this because my dad asked on the weekend, and I think it was 1,628, and it might have been 2 days ago. Anyway, it's roughly 1,630.
Should we have a run day counter? Like, is that something we could do? Like for on
I don't know. Let's not add to producer Nick's headaches with us.
That's very fair. Let's give him fewer headaches.
I'm at 4.5 years exactly on October 29th. So I'm coming up to 4.5 years.
Are you going to celebrate?
Yeah, I'm going to celebrate by waking up and putting my shoes on and going.
Hey, that's a good
There's no celebration. I mean, every day is like a small celebration, I guess.
No, that's a perfectly fine way to approach.
The next time I'll probably get excited is if I get to 2,000, but that's more than a year away from now, just by my quick math. So
yeah,
it's about a year away from now, roughly. Actually, if I'm at 1,630 plus 365, so if I get to 2,000, that when you're adding, like when you're stacking thousands of days on top of each other, then it's like, okay, this is real.
We're coming up on 300 episodes. Speaking of milestones.
I'm glad you keep track of that. Other than you telling me, I would have no concept. Like if you had never mentioned it along the way and you just said how many episodes deep are we, I would have no idea.
I wonder if we should do something for 300. Should we do something for 300? That's an open question to you and people listening.
I'm open for it. We just got to figure out what day it is. Can you do that ahead of time?
I'm sure we can. I mean, we can probably plot out the next how many weeks of when we'll do these 2 weeks and then kind of go from there. But yeah, maybe we should do something for episode 300 when it gets to that point. We'll figure that out. Anyways, Big Money Siege, thanks for answering questions. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode of our fantastic and amazing and spectacular show, The Chris Johnston Show.
Little so humble brag everyone. At the end, eh?
We're allowed to talk our shit every now and again.
All right. Sounds good, brother.
Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.